I was talking with my mom, Mama Peggy, earlier this week with everything that's happening in the world. My mom was a professor of world religions and humanities, and she reminded me this week the importance of history and how sometimes when we reflect on history, it can help us to reckon with what's happening now and where we are now. And so thank you, Mom, for planting this seed for me. So 775 years ago, 1248 was the year, to be exact, 1248. So in the Common Era, which was also known sort of in the Christian world or Christian patriarchy, however you might look at it, the time after the death of Jesus of Nazareth, right? In 1248, at that period, human history, we weren't even teenagers yet. It wasn't even the 13th. We were still in the 12s. That's how young we were. I want to provide context, okay? 1248, in Cologne, Germany, is an area known as Rhineland, which is a very special area I'll get to in a moment. It's the area of Germany closest to France, ancient. So in Cologne, Germany, there was a group of people who had a vision. And the vision was to build the biggest cathedral the world had ever known in the fashion of the day, which was Gothic architecture. So back in those days, the God of their understanding, very different, fast forward nearly 800 years from the God of our understanding. The God of their understanding, the way they understood it is they needed to build huge churches and cathedrals to show God their love, to show and pay homage to the divine spirit for all that they had been given. That was a thing back then. A true and real thing. It was a really important thing. Not only that, around that time, in that part of the world, those folks there in Cologne, Germany, had what they believed to be, and still believe to be many, the ancient relics of the three kings, or the Magi, who traveled to be present for the birth of Jesus of Nazareth. So it was like a really important thing to house what they considered to be this miracle of the Magi. And so for 300 years, they built this cathedral. For 300 years. Now, due to things like bubonic plague and the 30 Years' War, in there, the average age was 45. So when you think 300 years, that's like great-great-great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, great-grandparents, grandparents, parents, children, great-grandchildren, et cetera, et cetera. It's generations of people in those 300 years that dedicated themselves, these skilled laborers, which is what they were at the time, and masons, to creating this house of the Lord, as they called it, right? This house of God, of spirit. Knowing that none of them would ever see it completed in their lifetime. Dedicating their entire lives, generation after generation after generation, to something, to an idea, to a vision that they would never see. So 300 years go by, and during this time, there were what are known as the Rhineland mystics. We study many of those Rhineland mystics here in New Thought. Hildegard von Bingen, Meister Eckhart, for example. They lived in that part of the world during this period of time. Hildegard was a little bit earlier, but during this period of time where there was an interesting juxtaposition of mystical, high mystical ideas, these mystics that were so ahead of their time, right? They understood that you didn't need a place to experience God. And that's what they taught, and that's often what they were persecuted for. They understood that For them, the God of their understanding was the indwelling spirit that we talk about so much. The panentheistic idea that God, spirit, love, source, whatever word works for you, is in, through, and as all things and in the mystery. They understood that back then. And then there were the sort of traditionalists, or those that were far more conservative in the way that they understood the God of their understanding, right? So you had this interesting dichotomy there in that area of the world while this cathedral was being built. Meister Eckhart, who lived in Cologne during the building of this, wrote, "The most necessary work is always love. The most necessary work is always love." So 300 years go by, and there's wars, and there's all kinds of things. And for whatever reason, that group of people, that group of visionaries, over time, over generations, lost focus. And the Gothic architecture was no longer hip and cool. They were interested in new things. And as such, the cathedral in Cologne sat unfinished with a gigantic wooden crane like over the cathedral for another 300 years. John, do you have a picture of that? Can you put that up? There, do you see over there on the left-hand side the crane? Do you see that? Above the tallest part of the building there, that crane stood there, looking over all of Cologne for actually closer to 400 years. They just got used to it. This unfinished cathedral, this unfinished vision, this unfinished experience of the divine. So for another almost 400 years, generations got used to just seeing. I think they needed a DIY intervention, I may just say. Can you imagine? That just becomes the norm until a new group of visionaries decided to pick up where their ancestors had left off. They decided to finish this dream. They decided to finish what was for so many centuries a living prayer. And they completed it. John, could you put up that picture of the completed cathedral? There it is. For the longest time, this was the tallest building in the world until the Washington Monument was built. It was in the late 1800s when that was finally completed. A whole new generation, honoring the Gothic style, mind you, finished that vision. There is so much in this for us today, especially now. Because here is the deal. We no longer, in 2023, we no longer need to build churches and buildings to experience the divine. We walk the path that the ancient Rhineland mystics, and so many others like them, laid for us. We understand the power of mysticism and spirituality as opposed to religiosity. We understand that God is a personal experience. Spirit, love, is a personal indwelling experience. We do not need to build anything outside of ourselves. The call for us in this time is to build within ourselves. No longer brick by brick, rather thought by compassionate thought, which leads to action by compassionate action. We understand now that this is a world of energy, that which the mystics were bringing and ushering into the world, and even the ancients prior to them in the Vedics. They knew this world we are now seeing in our technology, in our science, the extraordinary ways in which this is an energetic universe. Just look at money. I don't know about you, but who has dollars in their wallet anymore, or quarters or dimes? Maybe you have a few just in case. I have a couple bucks in my wallet I've had for like months. Do you know what I'm saying? We used for the longest time ATM cards. We still use them. And now, even those are being phased out. We can just pay everything with a phone. Here's my code. It's energy. It's energy. Social media, all of the social media platforms, which one could argue have created difficulty and challenge in this world, I would say one of the most positive things is not only has it brought us together, but this technology has made it impossible to not know what is happening, for example, in Israel and Gaza, and Ukraine and Russia. It has required us to understand this energetic universe that we live in. It's no longer this tiny little world. It's massive. And what it has brought to us is the energetic understanding that we belong to each other. I don't care what country you live in, what religion you belong to, what race or creed or we belong to each other, period, end of sentence. Are you with me? We belong to each other. As Shelley so beautifully said last week, all of it, this life, is a holy sacrament. It's a holy sacrament. We don't need to receive sacraments in a church with walls. We can live this life as a sacrament when we are walking our dogs, when we are on the carpet with our babies or our grandbabies, when we are watering our plants, when we are holding space for someone who is moving through something challenging or difficult, when we are cooking dinner. We can experience the divine. We are an energetic universe. We are replacing the brick and mortar, the brick by brick need to build something outside of ourselves by fully understanding that is of no consequence if our inner world is not loving and compassionate and kind. The great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel wrote, "All it takes is one person and another and another and another to start a movement." All it takes is one person and another and another and another to start a movement. My friends, we have started a movement, and it is a movement of peace. It is a new world of peace that we stand for and that we will work for. We, my friends, are here. We have incarnated here to, like the second wave of builders who finished the cathedral, we are here to finish and to complete the vision of peace and love that so many before us prayed for and dreamt of. I say this during this global time of war and challenge, of the shootings that happened in Maine. God bless you, Maine. So how do we do this? How do we build this vision of peace in today's world? Mahmoud Darwish, considered to be Palestine's national poet, wrote, "And I tell myself a moon will rise from my darkness. And I tell myself a moon will rise from my darkness." You know, this, this war in the Middle East, I know, is weighing heavily on so many of us. I know this. I know it's weighing heavily on my heart. And just the other day, I went to get my hair cut. It's still kind of figuring things out, but that's all right. If you have curly hair, you totally get it. And I was sitting in the chair with my beloved hairstylist, Allison, who I just love here in Lake Oswego. I love her. I've been going to her for a long, long time. And I knew that I was going to be speaking with you, and so you are all on my heart, right? And so I just said to her, I said, so Allison, how is your world these days? How are you? And without missing a beat, she's cutting my hair. And she says, I am being present with what is right now. And I was like, shabam. Tell me more, girl. Give it to me. Because you know, Spirit speaks to us through our hairstylists, if you have a good one, in the grocery store, in line at the post office, through music, snippets on TV, on the radio. Spirit universe is always giving us messages, nudging us forward, reminding us to love and remember peace, to do the thing that moves the dial to create more peace in ourselves and the world. So I'm sitting in the chair and she says, I'm being more present. And I said, oh, tell me more. And she said, well, you know how the leaves are all starting to fall from the trees? And I got a tug in my heart, a tightening, because I'm a tree person. And there is always, it does not matter, there is always a moment when those leaves fall and I go, okay, God. You know, I know it's a season. I know it's just temporary, but sometimes it's hard to remember. And she said, well, the leaves are all starting to fall off the trees in my yard and where I sleep. She said, the thing is that this one morning she opened her eyes, and because the leaves had fallen off the trees, she was able to see the sunrise. And she said it was so beautiful, and it reminded her of hope. And I think that image is so powerful for all of us. The leaves are falling off the trees. It's a wintering time. This is a hard time. And the sun rises, and it's there for us to see. Hope is here for us to experience. Beauty is here for us to experience. And if you're not an early riser, the sun goes down too. That's quite beautiful as well. So we have this opportunity to remember, to deeply remember, that despite the wintering, the difficulty or challenge, oh, God is calling. See? Despite difficulty or challenge, God calls. For those of you online, the phone just rang at the most glorious opportune time to remind us all of the truth, that we are never, never alone. Hildegard von Bingen, one of the earliest Rhineland mystics, said, there is the music of heaven in all things. There is the music of heaven in all things. We are here too as laborers of love, masons, if you will, of love, to build this new world free from war and poverty and violence and climate catastrophes and inequities of every kind. We are here to build that cathedral. One compassionate thought at a time, which leads to one compassionate action at a time. I know that there is a lot of division right now. And we, as people on a spiritual path, have this exquisite, extraordinary opportunity to lead with love, to open our hearts, to be present to what is, and to move our feet, to do this work in the world, to be love, to build for ourselves peace, and to build for others peace.